Hey everyone, Reid Henrichs of Valor. What if I told you that we are required, per federal law, in order to have a firearm in good working order with a minimum amount of ammunition? Is that something you might be interested in? Let's go ahead and get started. Folks, I did in my last video, I talked about the financial burden and the proficiency burden that the state of New Jersey has imposed on its people to carry a firearm concealed. Well, we went into how the Bruin case upheld the traditional Second Amendment, that any firearms laws that people want to pass has to be within the text, history, and tradition of that. Well, one of the problems that we have is not only the cost of the training that would be required to go get a concealed carry permit in the state of New Jersey, to apply, all the privacy that you have to give up just to be able to do so. We talked about the application fees and how expensive that stuff is. Well, the problem is, and really the big problem is the course of fire that they mandate for people carrying a firearm in self-defense out there. This flies in the face of the text, history, and tradition of the Second Amendment. I'm going to read from this book here. This is Baron von Steuven's Revolutionary War Drill Manual. I've got a link in the description box below for that if you're interested. Now, what I'm reading for here is the National Defense Uniform Militia Act from 1792, signed by George Washington. And I want you to just listen to the words here of how out of touch modern people are when it comes to firearms ownership in this country. This is the sitting president of the United States at the time mandating what people should have for defense of themselves and their communities at the time. It says, every citizen to be enrolled and notified shall within 6 months thereafter provide himself with a good musket or firelock, sufficient bayonet and belt, 2 spare flints and a knapsack, a pouch with a box therein to contain not less than 24 cartridges, suitable to the bore of his musket or firelock, each cartridge to contain a proper amount of powder and ball, or a good rifle, knapsack, pouch, and powder horn, 20 balls suited to the bore of his rifle, and 1/4 pound of powder, and shall appear so armed, accoutred, and provided when called out to exercise or into service. Now, I want you to think about that. This provides the blueprint for the armed citizenry. It says, a well-regulated militia, which is what he just described, being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep, which means own or possess, and bear arms, bear means to carry upon one's person, shall not be infringed. And let me read you another portion from that exact same right here. It says, very specifically, every citizen so enrolled and providing himself with the arms, ammunition, and accoutrements required as mentioned before, shall hold the same exempted from all suits, distresses, execution, or sales for debt or for the payment of taxes. In other words, when buying such items, not only shall there be no obstacles whatsoever, but they would even be exempted from the sales tax on this. So that just goes to show you how out of touch that these people are with the modern understanding of this. And if we're going to go with the Bruin case, then we have to look at the text, history, and tradition of the Second Amendment. That is exactly the opinion of the Supreme Court. What I just read from you is the text, history, and tradition of the Second Amendment, which is every person should have no impediments whatsoever when buying a firearm in good working order. And notice that the age wasn't 21. The age, if you read further in the text of that book, is 18. So we have a major problem in a lot of the laws in this country today, no more so than in the state of New Jersey and states just like it. So what we're looking at here is, what you'll also find in that text of that is that if there were any deficiencies in terms of proficiency whatsoever, then that was to be remedied by a training officer or non-commissioned officer in the unit, at no expense to the individual. And there aren't any marksmanship standards mentioned in there. There aren't, you have to be able to hit this target in this amount of time. There was none of that stuff. It was just at the discretion of the officer of the unit, or the training officer, then they would fix any deficiencies in that individual at no cost. That's the text, history, and tradition of it. So rather than paying somebody, like you have to do in the state of New Jersey to take the course, the state provided all that stuff. And it's a big problem here when we're looking at the obstacles that the state of New Jersey has put in place. The financial burden falls on the individual to do all that, whereas in the Militia Act, that's not the case. Now, in a future video, I'm going to show you these courses of fire that the state of New Jersey has done. As I mentioned in the previous video, the really unreasonable course of fire that the state of New Jersey put on people was the equivalent of the New Jersey State Police firearms qualification. So what they expected was a rank and file individual who wanted to carry concealed should have to pass what the New Jersey State Police have to pass. So these are people that when they're retired, they have to go and pass this to keep their law enforcement credentials to carry a firearm valid. So these are people that have been in service for 10, 15, 20 years or more. And so to have a regular person who hasn't done that go out and do that on their own, people would think like, wow, okay. Well, first of all, I don't think that the firearms for police is that hard at all. Maybe it wouldn't be for many of you watching this video, but how about for the person that's just getting started into firearms? How about for a person who has minimal experience whatsoever to be able to go out and shoot that? That's quite unrealistic. Now, as a firearms instructor, people would ask, well, Reid, shouldn't you be encouraging people to get firearms training? Here's my philosophy on it, man. I think that it would be a wise thing to do, but it shouldn't be mandated. It shouldn't be required. In the state of Tennessee, when we went to permitless carry versus a concealed carry permit, there were a lot of FUDs out there, especially you lowlifes down in Chattanooga, that tried to get people to, they wanted mandating of training because nobody would go to their class unless they absolutely had to because they sucked so bad as an instructor and they're so boring. Now, the problem is that we've stayed exactly the same. Actually, our sales really don't vary that much from year to year. They stay pretty steady, but it's all voluntary. People come from all over the country to train with us because they understand the quality that they're getting. But in no way should training to carry a firearm be mandated. That's your right as an American citizen, that the right to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. So what we're going to look for is the New Jersey, what we're looking at is their course of fire. 50 rounds, 25 yards, 15 yards, 10 yards, 7 yards, and 5 yards. 10 of those 50 rounds were supposed to be fired at 25 yards, guys. So you could literally be on the cusp of failing when you left the 25-yard line. And then, of course, 15 yards from the holster, another 15 yards from the holster with a reloaded and kneeling shot, and then a 10 yards from a ready position, 2 rounds, and then 7 yards, 3 rounds in 4 seconds. They got a bunch of time standards, one-handed stuff, kneeling, with no provision whatsoever for people that are physically handicapped, no provision whatsoever for people that may have one hand or one arm only. In other words, there is no disability provision in there. So you either pass it or you don't. So then what happened is that there is a lot of pushback from people, as especially the Association of New Jersey Rifle and Pistol Clubs and attorneys Dan Schmutter and Evan Napin. They pushed back against this and they said, no, this is pretty unreasonable. So what they did is they had a much less stringent course of fire, but there still is a course of fire. As I mentioned, it's already unconstitutional. It's already outside of the text, history, and tradition of the Second Amendment. But the point of this video is there's got to be pushback against states when they try to burden their people from carrying a firearm. I live here in the state of Tennessee. No permits required to carry open or concealed. Every state that borders Tennessee, I could go to any state that touches Tennessee and pay $0, have any kind of proficiency, and carry a firearm with that. So for a person in New Jersey to have to go through the financial burden and the proficiency burden in order to do that, we're all Americans, but look at that person's experience versus somebody who lives in a much more free Second Amendment friendly state. It's not even comparable. It's not even like close to being the same thing. So at every turn, the state of New Jersey and other states like it have put so many restrictions and impediments to people being able to carry a firearm so as to make people just mentally fatigued and want to check out. That means some 80-year-old grandma, or that means some person who is new to firearms is going to be like, you know what, it's just too much of a hassle. I can't afford to do this, and then I'll never be able to shoot like that. That's what this whole thing is designed to do. And we have people that come to us for training all the time that are a little bit intimidated by it. And then after a couple of days, they figure out, okay, it's not so daunting. But I can only imagine going out to New Jersey and being taught by somebody who has to be there, or they can't carry a gun. I can only imagine that experience. And having grown up in shooting firearms in a much in an environment that doesn't even want you to ask any questions, the military and law enforcement, of which I've done both. I couldn't imagine just being a regular person with none of that experience and trying to do all this stuff. It was not Second Amendment friendly. It is not the way that our founders envisioned this going. And so I just am out here to tell you guys that this has to be pushed back against. This has to be defeated. And we have to keep pushing the ball down the field one step at a time and grind these people down. I can't for the life of me understand how it ever got to this point other than apathy and indifference. Well, that time is over. And if you want to retain your rights and you want to restore them, then we have to push back with the ammunition that we have historically, which is the text, history, and tradition of the Second Amendment, which I just read you, the official George Washington order from 1792. If you found the information in the video helpful, subscribe to the channel, follow me on social media, that link is down below. If you want to come get some quality firearms training, we'll teach you right, we'll teach you with respect, and we'll teach you with dignity. Come on out to Valor Ridge, we can help you. This is Reid Henrichs of Valor Ridge reminding you the lessons that we learn are written on the tombstones of others. We'll see you on the ridge.